we will focus on human technology interactions and a particular focus on how women engage with data and mobile applications. To truly understand these interactions, I believe it's important that we take an interdisciplinary approach, one that acknowledges the vital role of technical design, society, politics, and individual practices that play a role in shaping our relationship with both technology and each other. So these topics are very crucial, especially in light of current geopolitical climate where women's rights, women and girls' rights are being threatened globally. And in this context, I wanted to share that there's been some innovative apps that were created or developed to inform and empower women and girls about their rights. A recent collaboration that happened was in Lausanne and in the municipality of Lausanne, who collaborated with the Sorority Foundation. And the partnership led to the creation of the Sorority app, a free multilingual platform designed to provide immediate assistance to users in unsafe situations, whether public spaces, workspaces, or at home. And the app fosters a culture of mutual support where women and Flint people offer each other real-time help. And a key feature would include loud alarms. So I just wanted to share this because I thought it was also another form of app. Today, I'm very excited about the presentation. We will have our first speaker, Dr. Jessica Pidoux, will present her work, a comparative study of algorithmic user practices in online dating from matching algorithm to a human machine learning process. Dr. Jessica Pidoux is a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute of Sociology and the University of Neuchâtel. She's also the director of Personal Data Idaho, a nonprofit dedicated to helping individuals recover their personal data. In her presentation, Dr. Pidoux will share the research on matching algorithms in online dating, exploring the human-machine learning process and how these platforms influence how we present ourselves, especially women. She will discuss the impact of gender norms and patriarchal values embedded in these platforms and the role of dating apps such as Tinder or please help me give a warm welcome to the
Thank you very much for hosting me here. I will talk about different perspectives of online dating that I investigated during my PhD, and I will give some updates of what's going on now also with online dating throughout the presentation. Yes, so online dating. It's a very broad phenomena. The last statistics that were published by l'Office fédéral de statistique in Switzerland shows that 20% of Swiss adults are in a relationship with somebody they met online. It's an old survey, but it's the last one that we have officially, because today we lack information about what apps, how many users they have. We only have some few ideas in media or according to the downloads. So in Switzerland, it is an important phenomenon. In France too, and in the United States even more. What is also important to know is that the online dating has entered the economic market. These are companies that are now in the stock exchange market, and they create actually brand agglomeration. So when you're using Tinder, Tinder is part of a group called the Match Group that has over 30-40 apps worldwide. And there are other groups, for example, Bumble is part of another group, Pidoux is part of another group. And what is happening is that these companies are building up on technologies to enter into our intimate life. And what we see also is that there's an increased use of these apps. More recently, we have seen also that people are starting to get tired of dating apps. We talk about dating fatigue. People drop the apps, but they also come back. So the latest numbers I found was there are around 9,000 mobile dating apps worldwide available in the app stores, and Tinder is one of the most downloaded apps worldwide. So what I studied was both mobile apps like Tinder, but also websites, because they actually also segregate the kind of population that are using online dating. While websites are more used since the 90s, actually already for people older than 40. The mobile apps are now used for more by the youth starting even at 16 years old. And we have seen it's up to 25, 30 years old people are also there. And the websites have a lot of content that can be more or less sexual, can be more or less psychological, because they are treating different dimensions of an individual through the interfaces and the profile forms. So here I gave an example of a gay man website called Romeo, who is asking for the body type, the ethnicity, the hair length, the hair color, the beard, the eye color, and so on. It has usually sexual content. So it's to say that I analyze both communities, heterosexual, gay, or queer apps, and I'm going to show you why they are different. How can we classify them? Websites have usually also, like Tinder, propositions of your best match. And you can see there, next to the little heart, we see a score, 101. And basically the app, I think this is Partship, it is offering you a estimation of how compatible you are with another person that is available in the website. So what is happening behind all this is that we have a lot of materiality. So when we think about online dating, we think maybe about virtual, but it's a lot of physical material stuff that is behind. This is extracted from the patents of Tinder. Of course, this is very old style computers, but it's saying we have a device that is controlling our interactions or shaping our interactions through computing systems that have a server and databases. These both figures here say that they connect one user to another according to the database they have, and it means also that users are represented by different type of data. This is what is creating the connection. How do we get this data? How do we know about users? Well, it is through the interfaces. And this is something I will show also more, how is this an important mediation between us, the machines, the techniques that are implicated in this phenomenon. So through the profile, basically we're telling the machine, the developers behind, who we are, what is our height, our body type, our dressing style, if we drink alcohol, if we smoke, or in which university are we studying. And finally, when we get these two profiles from at least two users, we can compute this compatibility. But what we don't know too much today is how these scores are computed, right? How can we match somebody that has, it's not as we match people that have the same hair color. We know in couple formation, in sociology, that we don't necessarily look for the similarity, we also like diversity. It is a complicated process to match, to find a partner. So we don't know today how dating apps are calculating those scores, which are the criteria that are finally taken into consideration to present us or not some kind of profiles. So in my research, I was interested in different perspectives. the developers' practice behind those apps, behind those interfaces. What is the app design? Because this, as I said, functions as the main mediation between the users and what is in the backend. And then on the other side, what are the practices of users when they are interacting with this system through the interfaces? So I focus on their perception, how do these actors perceive reciprocally, but I do it through the specific features that are in the app. This is important as a more methodological or theoretical perspective. I don't ask them their opinions. I go see what they do and how they perceive users according to how they act. What are the actions that are concretely being taken in the app? And these, in the more scientific literature, positions with main transformation that we have been studying in sociology of couple or sociology of emotions. Maybe you have heard about Eva Illouz. Podarka is a demographist in Switzerland. She finds that dating apps are favor relationships and couple socioeconomic diversity. But we don't know in her study which apps she's considering. The questionnaire of the Swiss Federal Statistics is very broad. It doesn't specifically say which apps and how these apps are designed to really understand why this diversity is produced, or is it just the user choices at the end? Then we see that for Marie Bergström, also demographers in France, says that dating is a practice disembedded from social spheres. Basically, what she says is before we used to meet our partner at school, at work, from social places. Now it is a privatized activity because we have it on our phones with our fingertips. We can choose somebody. She was talking a lot about websites, by the way, which means also we are taking the dating into our place, into our homes, where we sit down and look for a partner instead of being outside in the public sphere. Then what I see here also is she's not analyzing algorithms or mobile apps, which have a different also influence in dating practices. And what Eva Illouz says more from a economic, basically she's a sociologist of emotion, but she's very centered in Marxism theories, and what she sees is that modern sexuality is a new separate sphere of consumption from romantic love. So we are separating the experiences of romantic love, and we are entering now in an area where we merchandise the process. We see people as products. We choose them. We rationalize how it is to date somebody. So, given all this, what I observe is that there is a dissociation between the design of the apps and the social practices. These studies and are usually more oriented towards the user experiences, qualitative interviews, and I wanted to integrate a computer science perspective where I could see both how the apps are designed and how these social actors are interacting with these techniques, and then how they're reciprocally influencing themselves. So it's more a STS approach, science and technology studies. My research question was the following: what are the mediations and relations between the different actors of online dating to commonly establish a human-machine communication process? In other words, how are actors learning to communicate in order to establish techniques and practices in online dating? And I check just the time that I have. I won't go through the methods and data part and go directly to the findings. So you saw I have different perspectives. I will give you some findings of every perspective. For the interfaces, so I analyzed all the profile structures when you go and register as a user. And what we see is that there are affordances. Affordances can be, for example, a like or a swipe. And these affordances are actions, but also restrictions to attract somebody. So you can, an action could be the like, you indicate that you like somebody, but men, for example, in some dating apps have a restriction of a number of likes. So these constraints and actions are enabling or not how can you attract somebody. So in the process, you're learning how to date given this structure that is predefined for you. It means also that not everybody has the same chances. For example, men have less likes, and this depends also on the business model. But this also depends because there are more men than women in the population register on apps, so they are trying to balance the request. Women complain that they receive a lot of messages, at least in heterosexual settings. Variables of user representation define what is attractive or your attractiveness, which is a very also limited space. What I saw is when you go to these profiles, all the answers are almost the majority are predefined. So how others see you is defined by the attractiveness standards that the apps has built for you to describe yourself, your body. And the input values is the answer. So the variable is, for example, body type. And then the answer, I call it input values. And it's when you say body type is thin or rounded, right? These are important elements actually later for the matching system to basically is how the algorithms are going to calculate the score because you're giving already these inputs. And what I saw here, it's analyzing specifically women's body in more than, it was 30 apps and websites, is that we can see a heteronormative definition of women's body in all the apps, including the queer apps, where actually we reproduce the erotization standard beauty of that we have seen through history. Women are mainly described by the upper body. The apps can ask breast size, hair length, hairstyle, curly, or also even the waist was also asked, which was very different from what you can ask for men specifically when looking for another partner. And I'll explain this. It goes very into detail to how to describe the women's body, so a man can find a woman. There's a website called adaptation. You can even include the underwear type of a woman to find a woman. But the other way around, it doesn't apply in heterosexual settings. There are not too many details about the men's body, so the women filter men on the apps, okay? So these examples show that there is a gender perspective here that is important to consider when in the design of the apps. And this is mainly guided by heterosexual norms. This is basically how these are the affordances that I mentioned, like actions that I found on the apps, and I just calculated the distribution over the apps. Some have more or less. If they are at the top in its demographic data, it's very important. When we register, we often say age, sex, right, name. And there are more sophisticated or specialized apps at the end that only use few affordances. For example, there is a limit of photos to share photos online. This is specific to gay men websites that can share sexual pictures, but they put a timer so it goes off. So these are the affordances that I analyzed, and then I created two types of apps according to this. the one that I call list view dating and the one that I call match dating. And the first one, list view, is the website classical, right? You see the profiles directly. And then you have the match dating, typical case, Tinder, right? You swipe. It's very different, the dating experience you're getting if you go to one another, because if you go to the match dating like Tinder, what happens is that you have an individual evaluation. It creates other cognitive processes. You don't have to remember the people that they're seeing. You just swipe. It's very reactive. It's very fast speed. You can swipe many profiles in few seconds. And this creates this intensity, excitement. Some studies talk about how it produces dopamine that makes you want to do more. Don't want to miss out the good profile and so on. And then we also observe that dating is a financial plan, because even if the app can be for free first, it has limited features that you have to pay until a certain time. And also always you have the premium access, which gives you more possibilities. For example, selecting the geolocation where you want to find somebody, or hide your geolocation, or only receive the people that liked you before. So you have a very different dynamic from those that don't pay. And the website's list view class that I call is very difficult, because you have a clear because you have a clear hierarchical ordering. The profiles are here organized because of the depending on the availability of the person. If the person is connected, it has a green color. Some other have also, for example, the geolocation, but it's usually last connected on. So this gives, at the top, we see some profiles. At the bottom, we see other profiles that are less connected. So you also start to learn in the practice that if you remain connected, you have more chances to be seen by others and to find somebody else. And then this requires more time on the app, also because you have filters to look for the people. You can indicate age ranges, but also the psychological profile. And so you have much more parameters than, let's say, Tinder, that it usually only gives few filters and the rest is done by Tinder. Can you tell me how much I haven't seen? It's 5 minutes, or it's been already a lot. I don't know. Okay. So these are more examples. I will go through the developers, and I will finish with this. It's very well, the major finding here is that there was a lack of methods used by developers to design the apps and create these user profiles. They were reusing profiles from other apps, and sometimes they were not online dating apps. So it means that they copy the profile with the variables and input values from other apps, which actually creates a sort of imitation or sometimes counter-imitation of what already exists. And I found that this could help to reproduce the social norms that are embedded in techniques. And there's also a second phenomenon, is that there's always a reduction of a social experience into the machine, because developers were struggling a lot to say, how can we put all the preferences of users in a profile page, right? So it is a reduction always when you're using an app. And that's why we saw that there was little diversity on how bodies were described. They were often referring to themselves or their communities. This applied both for gay men that were creating gay men apps because they thought, oh, we need a new app on this, or the same for the heterosexual. And this is in theories, we call it the I methodology, that I refer to myself to create these new users in the app. So this actually shows that developers act as translators of users and their realities, but always according to the machine, meaning the machine has constraints, memory constraint, technical constraint. For example, we can the App Store and the Play Store have very specific software development kits that you need to install. And this is gonna start to shape what you can really create as a dating experience or not. Okay. And finally, it is also a process of they are creating this experience that users don't know how it was created. You're just getting some results and you start to interpret what this might mean. You find some errors. There's never a justification of why this user is presented to you or not, right? So it creates also these imaginaries and we test many practices until we get maybe the result we are expecting. So I will stop there because I have talked a lot. I analyze also the matching system of Tinder, but what is interesting, I think, and that's why I focus here more on the interfaces and the developers, is that you have all these, it's not an algorithm that is creating the experience. It's the designer and the techniques of the developers. It's the interfaces that have a specific profile that represents users. And it is then these techniques that are gonna shape what you perceive or what kind of actions you can do on the app. Yeah. That's it. Thank you very much.
I think I find it very interesting how so many people and processes play a role. I forgot to mention, but we will have like the Q&A now, and then I will introduce Dr. Marcia Nißen, and we'll have another Q&A. So, and also please free to eat, get some drinks in the meantime. But yeah, we open the floor for questions. And, yeah.
Thank you so much for this talk. I thought it was interesting what you said now in the end, that the developers and the interface shape the possibilities for interaction or the experiences for the users. And you mentioned that one of your questions was also about the relations and mediations between these three kind of sites that you're studying across with developers and the application and users. And I was interested more in the user dimension, I guess, or how in your study you found that users not only utilize, but perhaps also appropriate or resist or tend to change the application they are engaged with. How do they, for example, try to engage with the application in certain ways so that the algorithm gives them other matches or other proposals or outputs?
Yeah, thank you. That's the last part.
Okay.
Basically, I conducted interviews with users where I observed their practices, and indeed they don't just follow what the app is, the app structure. Some do, because they also understand that these are new conventions that are created within the app. For example, they say you need to put a profile, selfie, picture with friends, and a picture doing some sports. And these are the conventions that they have learned that others practices show them in the interface, because Tinder creates this interface where the picture is very important. So they play with it, but they also overcome the limitations. Some say, for example, I have the feeling that I always receive the same kind of profiles. So they delete their account and create a new account to start to have new results. Or those that pass to premium because at some point they say, but I'm spending too much time here. I don't get real matches. Like I don't go to a date finally. So they pay because they see that they have at least the people that like them already. Or some says, okay, I go straight. I as soon as I match, I ask for a date. So we go on offline because I think we create a lot of expectations when we are writing a long time in the app. So it's I say that also this is part of the learning process. They create their own common sense knowledge, not only with the machine, but with others that are registered there. And that when they go offline, they usually share their experiences also in the past dating experiences. So yeah. So here first.
How are those normative processes different from like real social interactions? Because I mean, when I go to a party, I also know that there's implicit, oh, I've learned to behave in a certain way. I know that there's implicit codes. Like when I look for dates in the real world, it's not that it's not a norm that there's not a normative sphere. So how is it different? Like how much power do developers have? Because like from what you said, for example, like judging women's bodies in certain ways, like none of it felt specific to the online sphere to me, but I thought this is also how I'm judged on the street, you know?
Yeah, definitely. First, for example, from the user's interview, what I see that is different is this tension between we are trying to understand how the app works and the algorithms and stuff, and we're also trying to understand how people behind the app is behaving. So you don't have this mediation that in a bar, right? You don't have these techniques that are shaping this view that you have of the other. That's one thing. And then you can tell me, yes, friends can also influence how you perceive the other one. Of course, we can find. But one important thing here is also that I try to see some stakes or effects, is that it is more powerful what an app can do in terms of amplification, polarization, discrimination, because you get a whole population register on the app. And when these matching algorithms are learning from your experiences, they can reproduce this to new users. So it's like some sort of contagion that goes in a big scale through the technique, to the app itself. For example, the swipe is just creating a polarization, meaning you say yes or no, I like or don't like this person. And in the interviews, people say that it's not that binary, right? When you're on a date, you also want to have this feeling, the smell of the person, this aura, so many other factors that, as I said, in the app are reduced to a profile, variables, numbers, pictures. Yeah. You wanted to...
Yeah, so these numbers that you mentioned are sort of an inherent problem, I guess, on dating apps, but the way the interface is designed is also extremely important in how the interaction is shaped, right? And I believe the interface is created by really smart people. I have no doubt about this. But now I studied computer science and I had a full semester of UX design. And all of the people in the room were really smart, but we spent an entire semester minimizing the distance between two buttons. Now, my question is, how do we go from minimizing this distance to teaching the next generation of UX designers to actually not make the same mistakes?
Yeah, definitely. This is a more practical question that sociologists are not used to answer, but I try. And for example, I think we need specialists of couple formation and of sociology of couples in these companies. These companies are now funded because of its technology. We only have technicians, and we need more interdisciplinary teams in this case, because dating is not just a tech thing, right? And these people, it's their occupation to see their aesthetics, how can we align stuff. They're not caring about, or it's not their occupation to care about if the app works really for couple formation. And on the above them, what I saw also was there is a marketing department, there is a business model, there is the who is saying, just give me the numbers. They were asked often, how many new subscriptions do we have? So all their creativity, I thought, it was also being reduced to, does the business work or not? And I think this is a great point of innovation. If we want to move forward, can we think about other businesses models? Can we not think dating from the market's perspective? Or can we build markets that are designed, as I heard this and I thought it was a good idea, think about the markets for the people, not for the competition between the companies, between the tech, between, so I think I saw you here.
Yeah, regarding what you just said, I'm curious if you also saw that like for data of the interviews, because often the apps are not designed for good experience or like finding a partner fast, but like rather to stay on there for longer, right? So did people complain about that? Did they notice that? Or
no, I haven't seen data because they don't publish data analysis results. And I also have to say they have a limited view on couple formation, because basically they know until maybe you get a date and you left the app. So they just have this partial view and they can make assumptions. If you left the app, maybe you found a date, maybe a couple later on, or you just got tired, right? So they don't talk about this. And I'm glad also there is a limited view that they cannot know what's happened after.
I just wanted to come up because there was an online question. I will just read it out. Thank you for the interesting presentation. Who were the developers you worked with? The prejudice is that it is quite male-dominated field, which also influences design choices, I assume.
Well, it was big companies, medium, and also new innovators coming out with an app. So it was different size of companies. It was limited. I only found 10 developers, I have to say. It is a male-dominated occupation, but for example, I interviewed men developing gay men apps, and in their cases, the perspective was apps for gay men are sexual. So we have to create these sexual driven apps for gay men. But the other one was like, well, because it is always sexual about gay men apps, I want to create a gay men app that is more romantic, long-term relationships. So the innovation market was also always between this tension of let's do what it works for the community because we know how the community is, and let's create sometimes something very different. And in the case of where I saw it was problematic apps that are very generalistic, like anyone can register, queer, gay man. They were always the heterosexual norms that were more predominant because they knew that it was the largest population in the app. So they wanted to favor features for women and men heterosexual. And those apps are more problematic for other gender identities because they found themselves as a minority and the design is not adapted to them. And I saw you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment just to build on what you two were both saying, which is that there seems to be a fundamental disconnect in the sort of market strategy of dating apps and their purpose, right? So like key KPIs for these kinds of apps are typically like time spent on the app and number of interactions and number of monthly active users. But the goal of users on this app is actually to find someone and not be on a dating app, right? So there's a bit of a clash there. So maybe there are some sort of counterfactual sort of influences at play here with for example, the creation of algorithms or the UX design, where they maybe are not incentivized to show you your best match necessarily, but rather get you to swipe or scroll through as many as possible.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I refer to, can we innovate on the business model, please? How is it possible that for dating we also have this streaming business model, like, right? You just buy a subscription per month or per years. It's not logical. It's not logical. So it goes back to this. Yeah, we want you because what the model is based on user retention. And because the model is also, we want to target advertisement. Tinder is putting now vapes ads, Gillette ads for men. So this business model, it definitely is in tension with the idea of finding a partner. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're gonna have to set up, so we can try some food.
Thank you. I didn't control my... Yes, I'm gonna do it.
Oh, yeah. So yes, Dr. Marcia will give a presentation on digital female health, a life course approach. Dr. Marcia Nißen is a postdoctoral researcher at the School of Medicine at the University of St. Gallen, and she's the core director for Digital Women's Health at the Center for Digital Health Interventions. It is a joint initiative of the University of Zurich, ETH Zurich, and the University of St. Gallen. Her research focuses on leveraging digital health technologies to close the women's health gap. In her talk, Dr. Nißen will introduce the digital female health framework, which postulates to leverage diverse data sources and intersectional feminist design principles to develop more equitable health technologies across the lifespan. She will also present the latest development in SciMe, an open source women's health research app that aims to provide both women and individuals assigned female at birth with personalized insights and health management options, as well as researchers and healthcare professionals with the tools to better integrate sex and gender-specific data into their studies or practices. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Marcia.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't see my mouse anymore. Do you see the right view on Zoom? No, you don't, right?
Also, we might go like 15 minutes over time, so if you have to leave, feel free. Yeah, or please stay.
Maybe now.
I think now it's, yes, now it's good.
Okay, cool, perfect. Great. I'll try to move over here. Okay, great that you're here. Great to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Sophie, to talk about our research at the Center for Digital Health, and particularly about digital female or about digital women's health with a life course approach. My name is Marcia Nißen. I'm a postdoc at the Center for Digital Health Intervention and our core director for this research endeavor. I have a background in industrial engineering, actually, where I've grown very, very passionate about technology that helps people to help themselves. So I've grown passionate about digital health very, very early. And in my PhD, I focused on patient interactions with digital health technologies and then how to make the user experience good, because we used a lot of chatbots, rule-based, so before ChatGPT. And I looked into how to make the communication and the perception and engagement with these chatbots very, very engaging, so that people would use the app and would therefore then also get the actual digital health content that we would like to deliver. But this presentation will be about my research as a postdoc, where I now focus on women's health topics. And I'm still looking at human-computer interactions and how people interact with these technologies, but also how we can leverage technology to enhance, to advance women's health, or to close the women's health gap. So today I would like to change my slides. Yeah. Yeah. I would like to start with this slide today, where I would like you to take away that diseases don't treat the sexes equally. This is something that when I stumbled across it, or when I learned about these gender differences or gender medicine, was when I was like, oh, we need to apply the knowledge and the expertise that we have in digital health to women's health related topics. Because, for example, women are twice as likely as men to have chronic fatigue syndrome. Then more than 75% of all people diagnosed with autoimmune diseases are women. 85% of chronic migraine sufferers are women, and about 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients are women. So there's something going on that makes some conditions more prevalent, more dominant in women, or it affects women differently. Or disproportionately, so more often than men, or they experience different types of symptoms, or they require different types of treatments. However, at the same time, we don't know a lot about it. There's growing research, growing interest, growing funding going in that direction, but it's still a very large sandbox, a green field to do research, which is cool, but from a societal and from a patient's perspective, it's not cool. Because the women's health gap leads to harmful, late and incorrect diagnosis, and in turn also to harmful, late and incorrect treatments. So we have a problem, and we have a lot of reasons where this is coming from. Historically, because women have been excluded from clinical trials because it was too complex, and there were lots of problems with drugs, for example, that have caused miscarriage or problems with the fetus or with the baby. So people were excluded from clinical trials. There are regulations or policies in place to systematically include women in clinical trials since the 90s, but they still usually have to fulfill lots of criteria to be included in these trials. For example, they shouldn't be breastfeeding. They usually have to make sure they are contraceptives, so they cannot get pregnant. They are usually not allowed to be pregnant at all. This is a large gap when you are pregnant and want to take drugs because you have a calf or something like this. There's no studies that tell you whether this drug is safe for you because these trials are not conducted. We have stigma issues historically because female prevalent conditions were seen as hysteric. We have a lot of biases in research where most of the studies are again only conducted with white, Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic populations, which is the real populations, and intersectional diversity is often neglected as well. So we have lots of problems which all lead to, tastature is not working, a lack of sex and gender specific data. And this is where we are coming into play. So where we say we might have some leverage with these digital tools that we have to contribute data. Yeah. So our main research question is, or like the overarching research question over all our projects is, how can we close or contribute to closing the women's health gap through digital health technologies? So, and let me quickly define digital health technologies. I don't know who of you is working in healthcare or digital health. And I wanted to show you a little bit that there are various terms floating around in this sphere, and we will focus on digital health technologies, which is in our world, the biggest, the broadest term, which encompasses all others. So digital health technologies encompass the full spectrum of digital health products that are available to patients, caregivers, clinicians, and health systems, and may serve specific purposes across the entire patient journey, referring to digital therapeutics. So this is encompassing everything to software, hardware, and across the whole patient journey. And I wanted to show you one more slide on this because we use the definition by the Digital Therapeutics Alliance, which differentiates between patient-facing and healthcare professional and system-facing digital health technologies. And our work at the center is targeted at mostly at patient-facing solutions. So we're looking at apps and at wearables and at improving care, treatment or diagnosis from a patient perspective often. And then these digital health technologies are further classified based on whether they make clinical claims, for example, whether they are used in a preventive space for health and wellness, or whether they are used for medical clinical purposes and are validated or FDA certified. And in the women's health space, femtech space, there are a couple of digital health technologies which you might be aware of or have seen or might be using yourself. And I classify them here across the women's life course. So from puberty, menarche, like the first period, has some specialized offerings. Then through the reproductive phase, which is when women are menstruating or in theory able to get pregnant, where we have menstrual health tracking apps or pregnancy apps or apps that help you, or like products that help you not to get pregnant, but they are less than apps that promote or like are certified to help you get pregnant. There are many of them, like there are many apps out there. I don't have the number how many apps are out there, which rely on self-reported data mostly. Then there are apps that use sensor data, for example, from the Oura ring or from wearables to help predict the fertile window, like ovulation, when you can get pregnant. Then there are apps that have dedicated devices like a thermometer, for example, because the basal body temperature is correlated to the menstrual cycle phases. And then there are some tools which use hormonal data and kind of digitalize these kind of, we all know them now from COVID tests, which kind of like digitalize the readout and help like keep track of hormonal levels across the menstrual cycle. And then Tulipon and Quinn are something special. They use menstrual blood to monitor, for example, Quinn uses or is certified to monitor your blood glucose levels or like a blood glucose marker. And Tulipon is kind of not a tampon kind of thing, but it collects the menstrual blood and then estimates the amount of menstrual blood to diagnose heavy bleeding and heavy menstrual bleeding, for example. These three technologies, they have like the option to switch into a perimenopause journey. So if people are transitioning to perimenopause, there will be some dedicated journeys for the user. And then there are also a few and more coming peri and postmenopausal apps and tools for peri and postmenopause. Menopause is just one day in the life of a woman. This is the last day, this is 12 months after her last period. Perimenopause is the phase before that day, and postmenopause is the phase after that one day. Because I will talk about this more. Oh, sorry. Yeah, actually we'll talk about hormones very, very quickly, because I am very fascinated about them, and they brought me to say that we need to consider this type of data in our project. I would like you to take 3 things away from this presentation. First, hormonal systems fluctuate cyclically every day in menstruating women if they're not on contraceptive, like hormonal contraception. And there are 2 or like 4 major sexual hormones that regulate the menstrual cycle and affect everything that's going on to allow women to get pregnant or to kind of abort the egg. So we have estrogen, which you have heard of, and progesterone, which I will talk about a little bit more, and they together inform each other when to grow the follicle and release the egg, and then grow the uterine lining and shed it when the egg is not fertilized. So this is one thing. And the second thing is that this pattern changes over women's life course. So before menarche, before the first period, we don't have these monthly cycles with very predictable hormonal levels. And then when a woman transitions to perimenopause and her egg or ovary reserve is like decreasing, the progesterone and estrogen levels get really chaotic and can reach really, really high levels, really, really low levels, getting less predictable. And then after menopause, estrogen and progesterone reach a really, or like stabilize at a really, really low and really predictable level. But this low level also means that women are not benefiting from the benefits of these hormones anymore. Which brings me to the third key takeaway from this little course, where I would like you to learn, this was something I didn't know before, is that estrogen and progesterone, for example, in particular, they play a huge role in our sexual and reproductive health. So this is what we learn, or what people learn in biology in school. But these hormones, reproductive function, they are also hormones that find receptor cells in other organs than the reproductive organs, and therefore have an effect there as well. So progesterone, estrogen, for example, is basically a cell growth stimulating hormone. So it also helps, for example, bone cells or brain cells or certain blood cells to grow and to maintain their health. And progesterone, for example, has some anti-inflammatory properties, which is interesting to know if you think that these fluctuate across the menstrual cycle, so that when more progesterone is present in the system, there might be more anti-inflammatory features present than during other menstrual cycle phases. Yeah. And there's some evidence or some research studies who look into these kind of correlations between menstrual cycle phases, for example, for blood glucose levels, which are the blue lines, which are a little bit higher or significantly higher during the luteal phase, which is the phase after ovulation, compared to the follicular phase. And there are similar patterns in the body or physiological processes of women, also for blood lipid levels, for example. So here you would see the total cholesterol level across the menstrual cycle, or like the low density cholesterol levels, which follow a certain pattern. It might be something you want to consider when you get your blood drawn, or like blood tests. Or for the blood glucose levels might be something important for diabetes patients who manage their blood glucose levels with insulin or lifestyle changes. And there is such research for psychological conditions as well, so mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. Which brings me again to our research and the framework that I wanted to present today, and again to this slide, because when I realized all these things, I started reading about these things, we strongly felt that that it's not enough to differentiate, or like when we do research with asthma or diabetes or dementia patients or suicidal patients, that's not enough to differentiate between whether they are men or women, and to stratify for that, or like to include that in analysis, but to also make sure that we know, for example, in which menstrual cycle phase the participant is, or whether someone is taking hormonal contraception, or whether someone is transitioning to menopause. So where they are in their female health journey, so to say, because if we build models, for example, to predict suicidal ideation, we might want to take that into account. It might help us explain some variance or explain or improve these type of models. Yeah, so we moved in that direction to develop and evaluate sex and gender-specific digital health technologies, to think about equitable and feminist design principles that help us ensure that we can collect this type of data with two goals in mind: to empower women and individuals and female at birth to account for that data when they learn about these kind of things, when they use an app. But also to empower researchers like our research at the center, but also other researchers or clinicians research, so that they become aware of these things and that they might want to include this type of data in their trials as well, be it healthcare or other trials. We're also doing one study where we look at the influence of the menstrual cycle on technology usage. So we basically want to understand whether people use their apps differently depending on their menstrual cycle phase. This is a little bit exploratory, but could be also like considered in other research than healthcare, I think. Yeah, so we developed the digital female health framework, or like the first version of it, where we thought about which type of data, which type of information characteristics do we want to take into account, which type of factors, and differentiate between momentary factors and permanent factors. Momentary factors as in these hormonal patterns, they are on a daily or a monthly basis, which we want to account for, as cycle phases or in the moment experiences, symptoms, for example, menopausal hot flashes. These other factors, which are not sex or gender specific, is data that we already take into account at the center in many studies, because we can track most of that with the smartphone or with wearables, or yeah. And then permanent factors account for like female health history, by which we mean that we would like to ask whether people have taken contraception, hormonal contraception or hormonal replacement therapy, or whether they know of any condition that might affect their female health. As well as, again, non-sex or gender-specific factors to improve or like increase an intersectional understanding of data that we have, such as disabilities, neurodiversity, race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic background, among others. And then to give them some guidance to researchers, we classified data that we can collect into 3 levels. And the easiest that we could do always, I think, and which is done the most probably, would be self-reports, just asking people about some of these things. If you're doing a 4-week-long study with like population sample, representative population sample, you could ask people when their last period started, or when whether they take the pill, etc., or whether they have already given birth, these kind of things. This is easy. So we have collected like kind of a tool set of questionnaires that could be asked in studies. Then we have look a lot at level 2 data, as we call it, which would be less invasive and passively tracked data from wearables and smartphones again, but also at-home test kits, so stuff that you can get over the counter from a pharmacy and can do yourself, for example, to measure hormonal levels. And then level 3 data would be more invasive and clinical data that you can get from your physician, like blood tests, biopsies, ultrasounds, etc. Yeah. So and then there is an access to this pyramid, which classifies the lower level data as more subjective data until up to more objective data on level 3. But these data types also come with a lot of constraints from bottom to top. So the more data you want to collect, the more expensive it gets, the more resources you need, the more complexity you have to consider. Things really get messy, really complicated as a researcher. And I totally understand why people don't like to do it or don't want even to consider it, because it gets, like, menstrual cycle data is a mess, to be honest. It's really burdensome to collect it. But it's also really burdensome for the participants to collect it, because a lot of this data is there's a lot of data that you can only collect with self-reports. We want to use as much physiological and passively tracked data as possible, but then all of the psychological phenomena, like depressive symptoms, they all rely on self-reports. And to ask, like some of the diagnostic questionnaires for PMDD, for example, they involve a 2-month-long data collection where you have to fill out a questionnaire every day. It's really, really annoying. Really, really annoying as a patient. Yeah, so from the conceptual part, we wanted to bring that into practice, or like start proposing something to apply the framework to make it easier, and started developing CME to bridge the women's health gap by enabling the systematic integration of sex and gender specific data into healthcare studies, to provide individuals with tailored insights into their health, and as a research tool for researchers and practitioners to use it in studies or in their practice at some point. And how are we doing this? We started last year with a master project group from the Institute of Informatics from Neuchâtel, Marcia and Debs, who really got into the topic and who said, yeah, let's try building our own research tool, our own research app to include the data we want to include and to meet user demands, as like both from a end user patient perspective or a customer user perspective, as well as from a researcher practitioner perspective. And then they did a first like literature review and a market analysis of current apps and what they do, and did a user survey among people who use menstrual cycle tracking apps, and came up with like 3 core topics and themes that they wanted to address in the first version, which included to ensure self-agency through privacy and customization within the app. So we wanted to make sure that users decide what they want to track, how they track it, and where to store it. Then one big issue was that people complained it's so burdensome to think about tracking your menstrual health experiences. They usually or often only track like the first day of the period, or they forget about that as well. But if you want to understand patterns in menstrual health related experiences and symptoms, you need to track on a daily or like on a more regular basis. So this was one issue that we wanted to address. And then another issue was that people complained or mentioned that it's burdensome that you often have to change apps, or that it is difficult to get out of an app that you have used for some time. So if you have been using the Flow app but realize privacy things are not done as well as I would like them to be, then you can't take the data out and move them to another app easily. So these were 3 things that we wanted to address in the first version with CME1, and developed an app. Another important aspect actually was that people didn't want to have one of those pink and girlish feminine kind of apps, something more neutral or something, or more options to choose. So we started with a more neutral bluish kind of version where people could change the colors if they wanted, but tried to integrate some of the features that were mentioned, like people could choose the type of symptoms that they wanted to, or experiences that they wanted to track, and try to work on the first set of visualizations and personalized insights based on the data that they track, and developed a watch app so that they could also track on their watch when they didn't want to take out their phone. So we had a base version, and then we had a second team last semester who wanted to tackle this long-term engagement problem and to make this more appealing and more fun. So we used some gamification elements like streaks and challenges and quizzes to motivate people to track or like to reach tracking goals. For example, tracking headaches across one menstrual cycle or for 7 consecutive days. And then with these challenge points or streak points, they could like get access to the knowledge base or to these themes, for example. And then we did a small user study with 11 users who perceived this quite well, and will continue developing this app to include more user journeys. Yeah, so we had 2 groups so far. We also have one DSI challenge group working on researchers and clinicians' requirements towards such data and towards such an app. Then we have now one master student who looks at irregular cycles, perimenopause. One group which will start this semester, like another master project group, to look into particularities or requirements for young adolescents who had just had their first period, and so on and so on. I hope this will continue to grow so that we can build in more of these life course ideas. And these are like clinical projects where we are applying or like applying for SNF funding. Yeah. So this is my last slide. This is our vision that we set out 2 years ago. Davini is here with me, actually. He's my PhD student. So we want to contribute to creating a world where women and individuals assigned female at birth have complete understanding of the power of their hormones and use that knowledge to make the best health and lifestyle decisions every single day across their lifespan. We also have Sabra here from the Center for Digital Health Interventions. We still don't have a CRS promotion slide. So we have a CRS in digital health, if you know someone who would like to learn about digital health.
And to have Marcia as one of the teachers
Yeah,
in
actually.
the module, you can design your own intervention.
Yeah.
Contact to us if you're interested.
Yeah, happy to take questions. I hope I can answer them, or approach me if you feel like you would contribute to that as a student or as a researcher and feel like you see value in this and would like to advance it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, you presented all these apps, and but I was wondering also if you consider the apps that are already adopted by practitioners, and basically there's I know a doctor that has an app for maternity follow-ups, and there's like a registration system through the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And then the person has to download the app. And I was wondering, like, wow, but this is now the person can find the blood test and all this data in there, plus also self-reporting more data. But it's now like institutionalized and legitimized by the doctor. But I still think that you have these issues, many that you mentioned, also just leaving this knowledge to a person that is not a professional, right? Yeah, so I was wondering your thoughts on it, or if you consider also these apps.
Yeah, well, we always look at other apps as an inspiration, like these, like in your case with the apps that dating app developers are looking at other apps and like copying from each other. So we are also looking at how others are doing it, like best case practices. We are also very keen and eager to work with secondary data to get access to data that is collected in clinical settings already, but it's not easy. And you have to adapt your research questions accordingly. And we approach this research partially from a human-computer interaction perspective, and it's a design and development process for us and research, and like bringing this knowledge to the project as well. But we also want to include or like work now with clinicians and researchers to understand their perspective on their needs, like what they are missing or feel they are lacking in other tools. I think the example that you mentioned, that is like heavily biased towards fertility and pregnancy related topics, but women's health conditions like pathological conditions are less covered yet by digital health technology. So a lot of research, or like most of the research in that direction, has started with reproductive functions of a woman, like fertility and helping them to get pregnant. And only one app is certified, FDA approved, for preventing pregnancies, which is interesting in my opinion.
Thank you for sharing this with us. I have many questions, and
Oh.
one I will just ask one.
Okay.
I'm really curious about your approach in your work, and I think your presentation, to me, it says that women are more likely to be sick and unhealthy than men. There were many figures and numbers that you presented to us on this to sort of present the problem, and I think such claims sometimes risk to reinforce ideas that women are unhealthy or unfit potentially to participate in decision making in private and public life. And I'm curious about, I mean, there are long histories of trying to naturalize the inferiority of women through kind of biological studies. So I'm interested in what lines of feminist theory that you engage with to try and make a feminist claim or take a feminist stance in your work.
I'm a lay feminist. I love the bell hooks books, and that's about it. So I'm looking at literature research that already brings together feminist principles. Like there are research who dedicatedly look at theories from a feminism research and its application in digital health, which develop design principles, or which lay the foundation for we take it off, kind of.
How do you think with the hopes, for example, because your aspiration is also to develop feminist design principles you mentioned.
Yeah.
So the hopes I think is really interesting, and that's also Black feminist thought. She brings in and focuses a lot on the individual experience of everyday women and how that then feeds into, I assume, potentially your principles.
Yes, yeah, and the intersectional aspects of it, probably, to not only think about sex, but also other factors that people are marginalized for, and to take that into consideration as good as possible. And yeah, the idea, we started with this as well within one feedback from a user survey that we did was as well that people feel that their experiences are not personalized, or that their data or the information they get is not personalized towards their needs and towards their context and their backgrounds. So this is something we want to reflect in this development, and to think about these different journeys or factors that people bring to that topic.
Thank you.
Yes, I want to thank you for your presentation. So I read the book Period Power, and when I was reading it, I was like, okay, maybe this is more of a personal note. When I was reading it, I learned a lot of things that I didn't learn about in biology or in my bachelor in psychology, and it is I also felt like, oh, knowing about specific things, and maybe it is reductionist to talk about it like it's a biology, but yeah, I felt like, there are certain moments in your cycle where you're more prone to do this, and of course it can get reductionist, but I also experience it myself. And of course, I'm not going back every month to this book and reading about maybe you want to do this more at this time, or socialize more, and or take more care of yourself in this time. Are you also doing maybe considering these or having, I don't know, recommendations of the day or recommendations for this week? Because I think for me that's also useful, because I can be more conscious of oh wait, I don't want to reduce it to menstrual cycle, but it does play a role in the end, as you've shown with the hormones and how complex it is, and there are so many hormones playing a role. So yeah, I was just curious about this.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by this line of thinking and research as well. And we did a scoping review at some point, a master's student who looked for studies which looked at effects of lifestyle changes in different menstrual cycle phases. And one, we found several things. And among them was that many studies are, like, for example, for adaptations of your exercises. Many of these studies are conducted with professional athletes or Olympia participants, or like not like the broad population. So that was one thing that we realized. Then another one was that these studies are really small in terms of sample size, with 10, 15, 30 participants. So sometimes not fully conclusive, or they were exclusive of certain type of experiences. For example, not looking at hormonal contraception methods, like what this kind of affects the set. Or they only included people with regular cycles, with really regular cycles, didn't allow for menstrual health conditions or irregular cycles. Then the power period book. But I, on the other hand, see that it resonates really well with people. I also would say that I feel these changes and that it helps me to adapt to menstrual cycle phases, but the data is not completely there yet, the evidence. Yeah.
I mentioned that also one part of the project is like adding more data in this gap. So is one thing of the app also to share data for research? Or like,
Yeah, the data, like we purposefully collect the data on participants or people's phones, so they have it on their machine locally. It's not sent to any cloud or something like this. What we did for like these first evaluation studies was to ask them to export it and to send it, or like to upload it to a server, but like with intention, quite consciously, so to say. Yeah. Not by default.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us, and thank you also, Dr. Pidoux, for joining us. If you have any questions, also please feel free to take food with you. Maybe not the drinks because I repurposed them for next week, but yeah. And thanks for joining us today.